Welcome to Something More with Chris Boyd. Chris Boyd is a certified financial planner practitioner and senior vice president financial advisor at Wealth Enhancement Group, one of the nation's largest registered investment advisors. We call it Something More because we'd like to talk not only about those important dollar and cents issues, but also the quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Here he is, your fulfillment facilitator, your partner in prosperity, advising clients on Cape Cod and across the country. Here's your host, J. Christopher Boyd.
All right, welcome to the program. Thanks for being with us. I'm Chris Boyd. I'm here with Jeff Perry and Russ Ball. We are all members of the AMR team at Wealth Enhancement, and glad to have you with us as we talk about some lessons that I'm thinking about from recent interactions with clients or prospective clients. And I don't know, I think there's some good nuggets in here that we can talk about that people could benefit from. I think one of the ones I want to talk about is a client who has a big NVIDIA position, which, naturally has done fabulously over the last couple of years. But before we talk about that, let's talk about other things, because I think that'll dominate our discussion.
You're teasing the NVIDIA.
I'm teasing it a little bit. Yes, exactly. We had a conversation with a young man who is, I don't know, he's in his mid 30s or something like that. And Russ and I had this conversation, and it was really interesting because it was talking about just basic financial planning priorities and things to be thinking about. Russ, what were some of the things that we should take away that might be transferable to everybody as they think about some of these questions and priorities that stuck out for you?
Yeah, well, I think he was starting to envision his financial picture, wanted to get organized, and you're advising him on some of the different options for how he can go about starting that process now that he's in the green and he's debt free.
Yeah, which is amazing. He had graduate school expenses and college expenses and gotten them all out of the way. So clean slate there. So
that's quite a major accomplishment.
Yeah. I was feeling like that was a good move to be in that position already. So, that's number one, I guess, right? Is you got to get control of debt, right? Particularly, as a first priority when it comes to some of these things, right? And a lot of times it's not student debt, which can be at a more manageable interest rate, depends on the type of student debt and when it was taken out. But it can also be credit card, consumer debt. And, when you think about consumer debt, most of those are double digit interest rates that you're dealing with. It can be high. It can be, pretty dramatic. So, we were saying, well, that's a absolute, pay that down first, because, that's a rate of return you can't get guaranteed from your investments. But there were also questions of, what's the pecking order? And we were talking a little bit about this after the meeting.
Yeah.
And just thinking about, well, there's some, there's room for discussion, room for debate about some of the things about what should be the pecking order of once we get sort of our debt in check, then what?
Yeah. And definitely in my mind, it would be emergency fund first to cover, at least 3 months of expenses. And just in case something happens to the car or, anything could come up that will be a big expense, and you can draw from that emergency
fund.
And
prevent you from having that double digit interest rate cost.
Like creating more, right?
Yeah. Which has, even though it may not itself make you a lot of money, it has virtue. And, and along with that is, let's face it, just because we have certain expenses that are absolute, we also have some expenses that are delayed. I want to take a vacation, and well, you need some savings for the delayed spending.
Right. And then, after those are set up, after you have savings set aside for emergencies and any plans for the near future, then typically I would think max out your employer match. So whatever you're getting, if you have a 401k or 403b or anything like that.
Yep. Simple IRA, whatever.
Trying to get the match from the employer. And then typically I think it would be the next place would be a Roth IRA if you're able to open up a Roth IRA if you're under the income limits for those, maxing that out, and then moving on to your 401k again,
Go back to the
going
work
back
plan.
to the 401k, trying to max that out, and then anything above that would maybe go into like a brokerage account.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thinking.
So Jeff, I mean, that's right up your alley, right? With this kind of thinking. I actually said something a little different, sort of the pragmatist in me. I said, just put money into your work plan, just keep improving, a little bit every time you have a pay raise, revisit how much you can put into your work plan. And I think Russ makes a good point that, the Roth would probably be more desirable depending on your tax bracket.
Sure.
But in this case, it probably made sense. But at the same time, the pragmatist in me says, well, it's very easy to do the work plan and have it be persistently done, where you might not be as, diligent in putting the money toward the self-directed, Roth IRA account or whatever it might be.
Definitely. And
Yeah, the work plan is where people build their wealth typically because it's on automatic pilot. It's after, you get your paycheck,
Sight out of mind, right?
you structure your budget and your cash flow on what you bring home. You're not even thinking about it in most cases. So some of this is behavioral science of finance, right? Not
Right.
just, I think Russ makes a great point on the Roth, the value of the Roth and the value of diversity in types of accounts,
Yeah.
for later, right? You want to have
Tax diversification, right? Yeah.
right. But not everyone is that disciplined where they can say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, A, B, C, D. Some people are best putting it on automatic pilot, especially when they're younger, and getting that savings going.
Russ, you also just as an aside said, by the way, there's some interesting programs you might take advantage of too, which I thought was really kind of interesting. Jeff, I know we use some stuff with programs we have for our clientele that can help to look at what's their budgeting, what's their cash flow looking like, and get a sense of what's happening there. But Russ, you were saying there's some great programs out there.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people think of budgeting and they think of we need to start a spreadsheet and start inputting data, and it's not the most fun thing to do on a Saturday afternoon or whatever it is. And checking in with that and making sure everything lines up. But fortunately, we live in modern times and there are apps for these sort of things. And
there's an app for that.
There's an app for that.
There is an app. There's more than one. So there are plenty of apps out there. Some free, some paid, and I really benefit from the apps that I use to budget and also just to observe my cash flow month to month, year to year. You can look at everything in a very user friendly format. You can set budgets and get those email alerts or notifications when you're getting near that budget or going over that budget. And at least for me, over the last few years, using budgeting apps, it's helped me get a better sense of where my money is going and how I think about money. And to encourage friends and family to use them. There is a little bit of, you have to recategorize certain expenses that might not have come through properly, but really you get even if you don't revisit the app a few times a month, it's still a good sense like, okay, some of my money is going one place and some of the money is going somewhere else. I have friends who are like, I got a pay raise and somehow I don't know where my money's going, but
you're going out to eat more is what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, the app can tell you, you spent X amount more than you did last month on food. So it's really helpful for me.
No, it's a great tool, and it prioritizes what you value is where you should spend your money. And so if you know where it's going, you can help better align those two things.
Definitely.
So anyway, lots to think about. I want to move on to the other topic so I think, just as an aside, if you're starting out and want a little help, we got people here that love doing that kind of thing. So, you're welcome to reach out to our company to get a little bit of guidance along the way. So So, one of the things I wanted to come back to was this conversation that we had with, or have this circumstance we're dealing with a prospective client where they have a particular stock. In this case, it's Nvidia, but someone else, it could be crypto or whatever it might be, some Bitcoin type thing or something that's gone up dramatically in a short period of time,
Right.
and a big win. And suddenly it's a really big percentage of one's investments. Uh, what do you do? Right.
Right.
There are, there are many stocks that have had this story over time. Right. And of course, I'm thinking back to the .com era where stocks, just in a good way, blew up, really valuable. But, come 2000, a lot of those stocks took a really big hit.
Or
And
disappeared.
or disappeared. Not that all of them will disappear, but
Right.
but you can just see it, dramatically change, and that perception of wealth that you've had one minute becomes very different. And what's the best practice? On the one hand, it seems kind of hard to convince someone to say, yeah, that stock that's gone up, 500% or whatever it is, right? Yeah, you really should. You shouldn't own as much of that as you. You're right. It sounds kind of like, what? Are you crazy? It's done great, But on the other hand, it is really extending your risk profile, the degree of volatility that implies. And volatility works in two directions. We tend to like it when it's going up, but it doesn't just go up. It tends to go both directions. So, it becomes a question of what do you do when you have an overly, and this can be because sometimes someone has an employer that gives them stock, or they have stock options, and they end up, as an accentuated position in their wealth, their portfolio. It can be even for someone who's self-employed that has a lot of eggs in one basket. But as you start to think about some of these things, you start to look at, well, how do I manage risk, and what should I do in different circumstances? So I wanted to throw that out there for a little bit. Jeff, you look like you got something to add to the topic here.
Well, I think we have to recognize that, this isn't just a financial decision with a lot of people. People create these biases that they have. And, this one is like they purchase this stock, for example, or work for a company, and I'm going to use this term, fall in love with it.
Yeah.
Because they love where they work, or they love their decision to buy Nvidia in this case. And and then they have a series of events where the stock's going up, it splits, it doubles, and it's on the news every night. And it's like a confirmation bias where they're being proven correct over and over again. And so that bias may, and we all have this stuff, we fall in love with stocks, we fall in love with companies. And it may inhibit your ability to really look at this objectively, either from how's the company doing now or into the future, or am I better served by trimming this position, diversifying my assets? You're right. It's tough to tell somebody to do that and have them get over that bias and make a better financial decision long term, which is to not just be so focused on one individual holding.
I have a friend who bought a small company in the pandemic, and it was a pharmaceutical company that had this great, potential.
Mm-hmm.
It shot up. Suddenly, they're worth millions, right? And I urged them, sell, take some of the money off the table, keep something in there, but take some of that money and put it in your pocket, lock it in. And they didn't want the capital gain. Naturally there's a big tax consideration that gets people, gets into people's minds about this. So he was not willing to take the tax capital gains. So the good news is he will never have to worry about the capital gains.
Because
the bad news is it lost all of that value since that time, because things change, right? In the case of the pharmaceutical, the technology, whatever, the things related to the pandemic, things moved on, the different solutions were found, and this speculative thing didn't pan out as much.
Sure.
In the case of technology, things
Sure.
change.
Yeah.
There'll be a new chip maker does something different, something better, whatever. At some point, maybe not for a long time, I don't know, but you follow my point. Like, why take that risk of having so many eggs in one basket, right? In the case of the .com people that, did I mention this a minute ago? So we had clients in the .com era that the stock went up fabulously. Technology stock, telecom kind of combination. And they had this as a result of stock options or restricted stock. So the restriction lifts, the .com bubble bursts, and the price of the stock falls sharply. So they're in this position. What do? On the one hand, people are saying, well, I'm going to hold on to it. It's going to come back. And, of course, it doesn't. And then other people were like, let me sell what I can and get some of that money and put it, diversify. So, this is something that we've seen time and time again, that if you have this level of concentration, whether it's because you had an employer stock, whether it's because you have had great fortune that's, had this big run up, whatever the circumstance, it's prudent to trim that position. When you get something that is more than 10% of your wealth, more than 20%, more than 50%, you are in big risk, and it makes sense to scale it back. Try to keep it to under 10%. 5% is typically when we buy stocks in a portfolio for people who want individual securities. We're very reluctant to have more than 5% in any one position. Now that gives you plenty of opportunity for diversification. You can still have winners that really do well, but you may want to think about trimming when you get
this
really extended like that.
This problem, quote unquote,
Yeah.
this situation is even intensified if you have stock, too much stock or excessive amount of stock in a company that you're working at. If you're thinking about risk, right?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Well, you have the risk of the assets in the stock that you own. You may have the risk of that if you have a pension, or maybe you have a lot of company stock in a 401k, and the risk of your paycheck.
Yeah, your income and your wealth is tied to this. And if something goes wrong, you could be out of not only assets, but a job. And then what do you do? So yeah, you got to diversify your risks when it comes to this kind of thing. That's a great example, Jeff. It's hard to watch too, and it's understandable why people are committed to their company. They believe in what they're doing, and so they want to support their company in a sense. We've seen this in examples locally and nationally where people's retirement funds were heavily tied into a company that goes under, and that can be devastating.
Right.
I think of locally, was it the Bank of New England? Was it? I forget what the name of the bank was.
One of them, yep.
Yep. And then what was you talk about the company that's the energy company?
Enron.
I mean,
I have a very good friend who was a pilot for US Air, and it was the same type of situation.
So these are things to be careful about and be deliberate about. Now, if you've got a big position in a company that's really done well, whether it's because you inherit it, whether it's because it's your company plan, whether it's, just something you picked that's really done fabulously, what do you do? Right. I don't necessarily want to have all that tax in 1 year, maybe. Okay. That's a fair point.
Meaning if you
don't necessarily want to sell all of it, or, a bulk of it with that you need to right size, let's say. You don't necessarily want to have all that tax hit simultaneously at sometimes. Now, some instances it might make sense, but in other instances it might not. So what do you do? Well, I mean, I think one is to start with, have a schedule, have a game plan, not necessarily be that it be sort of abstract,
Right.
whether it's by dates. All right, I'm going to sell so much this year, so much next year, whatever, whether it's by price, either on the upside or the downside, that you're willing to have like price points where you will definitely sell.
Could be by tax bracket, right?
Yeah,
Sell up
what's going
to
to
a
push you
certain
into a
tax
tax
bracket,
bracket.
right?
But you can also think about option strategies, and there are people that are experts at this that we can draw in, or help clients navigate how to do this. But essentially, think about options as a way to mitigate risk. People tend to think of options as enhancing risk because oftentimes they're used as a leverage tool.
Sure.
But options can be used as a risk mitigation tool to buffer downside exposure. Now, insurance comes at a cost, right? When you buy auto insurance or something, you pay a premium for that, and that's the case here too. It comes at a cost when you try to mitigate risk, but you can sometimes offset that risk by this same kind of dealing with an option strategy. Some portion that might be selling on the upside by using call options to sell those calls that would require a willingness to sell some shares if things go up, and then a buffer to buy some puts that if things go down. There's techniques you can use that can help to mitigate this, to get you from where you are to where you want to be over a gradual period of time where you're not doing it all at once. So there's more than one way to think about this issue.
Yep.
All right. So, Jeff, you had one other thing that you were thinking about with some client experiences that you wanted to talk a little bit about.
Well, it's certainly not as exciting as watching your NVIDIA stock run.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
but it's a common theme that I see with people coming in, either clients coming in for reviews or planning meetings, or prospects coming in thinking about, they're about to enter that stage of retirement thinking. And, we spend a lot of time with our clients and our prospects to make sure that we help craft a financial plan that will deal with their individual circumstances. And one of the biggest challenges that I see repeatedly is having the client come up with a reasonably accurate estimate of their cash flows.
We routinely ask people, how much do you spend?
$2,000 a month.
Most people will be candid and say, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, that's
they know that money's coming in, money's going out, and it seems to be working.
Yeah, if it's fine, they don't dig in, right?
So they're kind of like, yeah, I don't know. They spend roughly what they have bring in, that kind of thing. And that's normal. That is very normal. And there's nothing that we're being critical about.
Not at all.
But when you're trying to do these forecasts, you're trying to do projections about how's this play out over time, you really want to be deliberate about thinking about, well, how much of that's healthcare costs, because those are going to probably accelerate at a faster pace, or
change in some way
as you age, right? And different categories. Oh, well, we're going to travel more. Oh, well, we want to put a number to that,
right?
How much you spend on the bills that are routinely coming in is one thing. Oh, I've got an energy bill, I've got a mortgage, I've got whatever it is, right? You've got these regular expenses, and that's oftentimes what people say, that's what I spend.
That's right. That's why I use that low number of 2,000, because
that's the part that's
start adding it up in their head, right?
And they remember those because they're routine. But what they don't account for is all the other stuff that are exceptions. Maybe those bills that come in periodically, not every month. Semi-annual premium. I've got a property tax quarterly, or whatever, right?
Whatever it is, yeah.
Then there's the fun stuff. Oh, we go out to dinner more, or we go, we take a trip, or are those things in those numbers, right? So, it's a challenge sometimes to identify what those numbers really are.
Right.
Another plug for those net worth apps, because thinking about that, I can go into the app and see exactly what my average is over the last year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is. And I can use that number when I'm thinking about a financial plan.
So what if I'm doing my planning today? Do those things go backward looking and dig out a lot of data, or do they only go, for 3 months or something?
No, I can go back all the way, like since I started using the app.
But it's since you started using, that's what I'm asking. It's so I can't just say I'm going to start today and to have it like dig into my numbers, to my accounts, to say
no. But if you have
much.
if you have
So
like
you have to start to get that data gathering, you're saying?
Yes. So, well, yeah, I mean, it'll take, I'm not actually sure how long it goes back, but it can, take your accounts and go back a little bit.
Yeah,
but
usually it's like a quarter.
Probably, probably a quarter.
Or you can use like a software program more robust than an app. Some of these apps feed into them, like a Quicken, or So it's only three ways you're going to get there. One is you're going to have someone who might be willing to do a robust budget, like a spreadsheet, where they're actually being, accurate, looking at, all right, what are my bills? What do I pay? What do I think I'm going to pay? Adding in all these categories. 2 is that they're already using some type of software. And then 3 is one that you defer to, Chris, when the individuals aren't interested in making a budget, or don't use software. You ask them to go back to their
there's a relatively
right?
simple way to do it. It's not going to analyze it the way Russ is talking about, with thinking about categories, and that can give you a tool to be more intentional about, is this how I evaluate? Do I really want to do money this way? But most people in retirement don't really want to evaluate. They have a lifestyle that they've reached a certain comfort level that they would like to just maintain, right? So we're just trying to get a handle on, well, what is that? How much are you spending?
What's the number, right?
So what's the number? So just pulling out, if it's one bank account that they operate their, pay checks out of, or whether it's, 3 or whatever it might be. Different families operate different ways, but basically just go through 12 months of outflows from your banking. And that's going to be, you pay your credit card from your bank account, and whatever it is, right? It's going to capture these things. Now, these days with Venmo, I suppose we got to add that into the mix with people who might be doing it off the bank books, but some other way. But in any case, you want to track those outflows, and it's not about the category as much as just getting the big number. There are sometimes you got to back some things out. A widow says, well, we had funeral expenses. Well, sure, that's a one-time thing. We're not going to need to count that as part of your cash flow. A family says, oh, we had that renovation we did. All right, well, we can back that out, but maybe we should be accounting for the prospects of future renovations that you're going to do from time to time. Maybe it's every decade. Maybe it's every so many years. Or, oh, we did the kitchen this year, but we're going to do the bathroom in 2 years, or fill in the blank. So we don't necessarily want to take everything out. Sometimes it's, we had that big expense because we had to paint the house, the exterior of the house. Well, next year it'll be the shingles need to be repaired.
The roof, or the furnace, or
So we don't necessarily want to take all of these expenses out as much as, be intentional about it. If there are things that truly are exceptional, well, maybe we account for it a little differently. But most of this, we're just trying to get a handle on what's been spent.
Right.
And that's a relatively easy way to do it. That's somewhat painless. We had someone we said this to recently, and they sent us all their bank statements so that we could dig through their numbers. That wasn't quite what we had in mind, but
it's better than nothing at that point.
At least we got the details.
And then the next
Russ dug through it all, right?
Yes.
He's like wishing they had an app.
There's an app for that.
There's an app for
that. But that number is really important. And then, the next step that I think is very informative to people is when you think that number has some credibility, you start to ask some questions like, do you plan on traveling? Do you plan on buying a new car? Do you plan on living in the house that you're in? Do you plan on
change? Yeah.
Do you plan on paying for someone's college? Do you plan on gifting? Is there a daughter that's going to get married and expects a $50,000 wedding next year? And all these life things that don't get into those statements or into your Quicken or into your app.
As you start to think,
it hasn't happened yet, right?
Yeah.
And so that really sometimes you have married couples like thinking about these subjects for the first time, which leads to some interesting conversations.
Oh, it does. Yeah, not everyone sees it the same way. You talk about, or when people are coming in to talk about paying for their kids' college education,
Hmm.
um, we're often framed by our own experience with these things, right?
Right.
So,
How do
well,
you
my
grow up,
parents
right?
paid for mine. I expect to pay for our kids, that kind of thing. Oh, I had to earn my own way. They should
Yep.
learn to earn their own way, whatever it is, right? And you can say the same about weddings and
I think the travel question is the most entertaining because couples often, as they are entering retirement, have a different vision.
what the ideal retirement looks like.
One thinks like we're going to travel every month around the world, and the other one is
I can
I'm
hunker
not
down.
going
I'm not
anywhere.
going anywhere. Yeah, yeah,
I've been
yeah.
traveling for work for 20 years, and now I'm done. Right, so we're joking about it, but these are questions that
It's real stuff.
people and couples have to really dig into if they want to have a really accurate plan, because these major things, these capital expenses or lifestyle choices, really influence the cash flow.
And plans are dynamic. I'm thinking about a couple. We had this great financial plan, really mapped out. We thought about a lot of these different variables, and things changed as time went on. They thought, I don't know that this is the right house for us. We want to move, and they wanted to put more money into the next house because of the, oh, this is going to be useful for a variety of things as they were thinking about aging in place and so forth. And the plan changed. Fortunately, we could adjust and adapt, and it all works, and they're good. But it gave them the opportunity to evaluate. Oh, if we do this, will it?
Can we do it, right?
Can we do this
Yeah.
without it disrupting our plan? Um, and they were forward thinking, and wanted to talk about it that way, which I love. That people are when they have that kind of
Hmm.
um, let's kick it around before we make a decision.
And
How's
we've
this
used
play out?
the housing where you're going to live on the opposite side of that, where moving has allowed a plan to be successful. Downsizing, the typical
True. So
situation,
true.
right? Avoiding
Yeah.
capital improvements and getting a house that's more suitable for your upcoming decades.
Yeah.
A smaller house, perhaps, maybe in a uh, lower expense location,
It's
whether that
funny.
be.
Russ and I were talking with a couple this week, and they love where they are, don't want to change,
Mhm.
engaged in the community. But even there, they were saying, as they're aging, they're recognizing that some of their friends move away, people start to pass, um, things will change,
Right.
and how they will plan for things becomes a little more uncertain, just
Hmm.
because things will change. And so, it's funny. We're all planners and want to plan, but sometimes it's you can't predict everything and you can't plan for everything. So you need to have sort of room for, I guess, the grace of, hey, how do we deal with this now? And as much as you can be forward thinking about different scenarios, different circumstances, which is what we were kind of encouraging in that conversation, was to be thinking about, well, what if one of you passes? What if, your healthcare needs change?
Yeah, that's where long-term care question comes up
Yeah,
frequently.
yeah.
Yeah.
And just as much as they know they want to stay at home, well, how will you provide those services? Have you investigated what company will be able to provide you what you might need? Whatever. Just having
Yeah.
sort of a game plan so that the next generation who wants to help you, you can point to your plan and say, well, this is what we have in mind.
Right.
There's sort of a a template. Break the glass. Here's the game plan,
That's right.
and that kind of thing. But that's really hard to do, especially when you're trying to envision, what you want to happen is to have good health and
Yeah, long runway with a
on.
smooth landing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and yet the reality is that sometimes it doesn't go as you might like. So,
But having a plan with real numbers in there, and full of all the what ifs, allows you to, when those things happen, either deal with the plan, or if you want to make a change, maybe you want to do a big gift to someone, or maybe you think you want to bring help in, you can test the plan. You can stress test the plan and say, what if we make that donation or make that gift or
gifting,
or move or buy a second home? Maybe a positive thing. Maybe we want a second home. What happens to the plan? And that can be very helpful or make you very cautious at the right time to be cautious.
Absolutely. So I guess what we're espousing here is throughout this episode, there's different aspects of the things that come up with you. One, you need a foundation of a financial plan that can help you throughout whatever stage of life you're at, that getting started or, as you're moving into retirement and moving through retirement, whatever it is, you want to have some help in that process, sort of lay out the game plan. But then you also need to be thinking about the portfolio design and unintended risks and how to manage some of these. These are all the kind of things that our firm does with people. And if we can be a resource to you, we're happy to do that. You can connect with us through our an email address. You can find us at amr-info@wealthenhancement.com, or you can give us a call. Locally, we're 508-771-8900. And toll free, if you're not right around here, you can call us 866-771-8901. So I think that's a good point for us to put a pin in it. And thanks, everyone, for your thoughts. Some good stuff. Until next time, everybody, keep striving for something more.
Thank you for listening to Something More with Chris Boyd. Call us for help, whether it's for financial planning or portfolio management, insurance concerns, or those quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Whatever's on your mind, visit us at somethingmorewithchrisboyd.com or call us toll free at 866-771-8901. Or send us your questions to amr-info@wealthenhancement.com. You're listening to Something More with Chris Boyd Financial Talk Show. Wealth Enhancement Advisory Services and J. Christopher Boyd provide investment advice on an individual basis to clients only. Proper advice depends on a complete analysis of all facts and circumstances. The information given on this program is general financial comments and cannot be relied upon as pertaining to your specific situation. Wealth Enhancement Group cannot guarantee that using the information from this show will generate profits or ensure freedom from loss. Listeners should consult their own financial advisors or conduct their own due diligence before making any financial decisions.